there, Maureen Chiana here, founder of the Mindsight Academy and host on Lead to Excel podcast. I work with leaders, entrepreneurs, and women of faith to help them achieve their goals by understanding how the brain works and how to drive that behavior change you need to be your best. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic I always talk about: how to rewire your brain. It's something people keep asking me about. How do you do it? How do you do it? I'm going to start with a quote. I'm not sure whose quote it is, but it's one I always use and remember. You see the world not as it is, but as you are. So you see the world based on how you are already wired. How do you get wired? You get wired from your upbringing, from the home you grew up in, from what you picked up at school, from education, from what your teacher said when you were a child, from society, from what you listen to on the news, on TV, or what films you watch, or people you associate with. You pick it up from life. Your brain becomes wired from your experiences in life, and it's what's going on in your brain that then makes you who you are. So that's what drives your behavior. It makes you make decisions the way you do. It makes you perceive things the way you do. Have you ever wondered why two people will experience the same thing, or be in the same situation, but experience it so differently? Have you ever wondered how you could say something to someone, but they've heard it so differently from the way you intended it to mean, or from the meaning that you intended? Why? Because what you said, it was landing on a different brain that is being wired so differently, so they're hearing differently. I use the example of you're speaking in English and the person is hearing it in German. And it may be completely different meaning. So our brains are so important. How they are wired is so important, because what we are depends on how we think. What brings about these thoughts? The information that we are exposed to comes into our brain, and our emotional part of the brain in particular. When information comes into our brain, it's processed a lot by the emotional part of our brain. That is almost like the brain scanner. And what it does is it's asking the question, this information coming in, is it familiar? If it's not, it could be a threat. So we need to do something to protect you. And that do something is activating their stress response, which is stay away. And that process is so fast. So it immediately kicks in. It goes into your body. You release these hormones, the endorphin, to enable you either fight, flee, or even freeze, depending on the situation. So one of the key things is that thought process, because it's the thought process that then determines the actions that you carry out. So one of the important things to do, I always say, is take that control of your brain, because we've left our brain to do its own thing. But now we know better. Science has now shown us that we can rewire our brain, so we can change the information that we have in the brain to the way we want it to be, so that we don't become victims of our life or don't become victims of circumstances. So the key thing to remember is that you can do something. The way you were born, the genes you inherited, they don't make you a victim, because even the genes that are not favorable, to an extent, about 60% of those genes can lie dormant all your life, but it's our lifestyle that then switches them on, activates them, and makes them, become present. That's why when you hear people, oh, this runs in my family, or, my family, we are hot-tempered, or my family, we're this. It doesn't have to be the case. You can actually change that all your life. And that is, I always say, God, thank you that we know this now, because now we know that we are not victims of this world. We can actually do something. So there are 5 steps that I use to help rewire the brain. The first is recognize the thoughts that you're having. The thought, is it empowering or is it limiting? And I'll tell you a story of when I wanted to open the Mindsight Academy. Bearing in mind that before then, few years before, I had to close a business down. And my brain at that time had registered it as a failure. Now, years later, after working on and discovering a lot of neuroplasticity, the fact that we can rewire our brains, I had changed that narrative to the fact that, yes, the business failed, but I was not a failure because I learned and grew so much from it. So that was why I was opening this academy. But the brain has now got activated. What if you open it? What if it fails again? What if people don't buy the training? What if you're humiliated again? What if? Now, what did I do? I then went to ask someone about, what do you think? This is something we do a lot. But the interesting thing is that the person that you go and ask questions, there's a saying, what you focus on expands. So the question you ask your brain or what you tell your brain will lead you that way. I went to ask someone about, what she thought, and her response was, don't do it. Nobody wants to go online. People prefer in person. It's not going to work. Don't do it. I had gone to ask, see how the brain led me to someone like that. If I had a different thought process, the brain would have taken me somewhere else. And the honest truth is somebody might even have said something else that I did not hear because my brain was not in tune with that. So when she said it, it aligned with what I was already thinking. So what did I do? I stopped. I did not do anything for about a month. And I felt so convicted because I was convinced that this is what God wanted me to do. So I was so convicted. And at a point, I had to ask the question, these thoughts I'm having, are they empowering or are they limiting? That's the recognition. And I said, no, these are limiting because I know why I want to do this. I know why I need to do this, why I need to create this academy to really help people, that can't come to in-person training, people that want to do it, on their own time, at their own pace. And also I could reach more people that way. So once I understood that this was limiting, the second part was then to reframe my mind. I then changed the narrative by focusing on the why of why I needed to do it. So instead of focusing on what if it goes wrong, I started focusing on this will benefit a wider range of people. I'll be able to reach more people, but also it gives people the ability to do it at their own time. And the truth was, people had actually asked for it. So it made sense. So, in the process of changing that narrative, I then went ahead, opened this academy in 2018. What happened in 2020? There was a pandemic and everyone went online. By then, my academy was already established. I was already using Zoom. I was already there. I was doing it already. So it was just so easy. Do you see? And that's why I've been able to do what I do and help more people and do what I'm doing now. The third R is release. It's release those negative limiting thoughts. Let them go. I kind of say let them surf the wave. Let them go. Don't focus on them because what you focus on, if I kept focusing on those, but what if? But what if it doesn't work? What will happen? The brain will keep taking me there and showing me every reason why I shouldn't do it because the brain is doing its job by keeping me away from what it already knows or what it knows could go wrong. So what I need to do is give the brain new information by reframing those thoughts and letting go of those negative ones. but creating, reframing, and focusing on the new one, so that the new thoughts become my default. The next R is reinforce. So keep pushing and keep reflecting on that thing you want. And this is where visualizing comes in. Keep looking, focusing on that thing you want, whether you want to paste it on your phone, on a wall, but keep reinforcing it in every way you can, whether it's journaling, writing, just so that every time you think about it or see it, you keep, dwelling on it, thinking about what it will look like. And then the fifth R is repetition, because science shows us that it's repetition that rewires the brain. So keep repeating it till it becomes effortless. And, we've seen that it takes about 60 days to create a new habit. I always advise my clients, keep going till it becomes effortless, because everyone is different. So the way you're wired and the level at which you're wired will be different from someone else. So it might take someone 60 days to create that new habit, but it's the repetition that will make it to become your brain's default. So keep going till it becomes effortless. And when it becomes effortless, you don't have to think about it. It's like driving a car. When you start driving, the initial lessons you have are quite challenging. I remember my son coming in after his first lesson and going, "Oh my gosh, Mom, it's so difficult." I had to think of what my legs were doing, my hands were doing, my eyes were doing. How do you do that? But now he drives. He gets into the car and he doesn't need to think about it. I've driven from my house to a different town, 30 minutes in the wrong direction, because my boys used to go to school in a particular town. When they had left, I drove to their school while I was meant to be in a different place. That's my brain. The brain our subconscious brain drives 90% of what we do. So we need to make sure that it's actually doing what we want it to do. And this is why rewiring the brain becomes so important. So I hope these 5 steps really help you. Recognize your thoughts, reframe your mind, release those negative thoughts, reinforce that positive thought you want, keep repeating it till it becomes effortless. So I challenge you to go and start rewiring your brain so that you can become limitless. Bye for now.